Hello everyone! So, after my first video I explained a little bit more about the types of tiny houses you could choose from. So tiny house on a trailer or on a foundation. And after you've chosen your trailer or your foundation, or maybe even a third option that I didn't even think of, you have to start building. And the first thing you should do is you should build a frame. So today we're gonna talk about framing. And specifically the most popular choice in framing, wooden framing. Let's talk about that. So, you have different types of framing. The most popular choices being wooden framing or steel framing. And the framing is basically the skeleton of your house. You have a framed wall, you have a framing in your floor and in your roof. And we're gonna talk about all of that today. Okay, first let's talk about flooring. Because flooring is the foundation of your house, which you build everything else on. But here it already gets more intricate because the flooring on the tiny house on wheels is different than the flooring of a tiny house on a foundation. Let's start with a tiny house on wheels. How do you make the flooring in a tiny house on wheels? So if you want to build a flooring on a tiny house on wheels, it's a very important first step that you should always do when building it on a trailer is level your trailer. Level it, double check, because you don't want a crooked floor, you don't want crooked walls, and you don't want a crooked roof. So it's very important that you level your trailer. Level your trailer. Okay, after you leveled your trailer, we're gonna start with filling your trailer. Because if you buy a trailer, you have a steel frame. But there are holes in your steel frame. It's most often not a closed trailer. So we first gotta close the trailer up. The most popular material used for that is wood. So you place wood in between the trailer beams until it's all closed up and nice. It doesn't have to be airtight. It doesn't have to be watertight just yet. No, yet. So after you filled your trailer with wood or with some other material that you chose to use, we are gonna make it watertight, bug-tight, because that's very important. I don't want any bugs in my foundation of my house. You can do this several ways. Okay, you can do this several ways. So after you've made your decking, that's what you call the closing of the holes. That's your decking where you're working on now. An important second step is making it airtight and bug-tight. You can do this by several ways. You can, for example, close the whole floor off with galvanized metal, for example. It's not really enough to just put a foil on top of it. It could be an important part of it to put foil over your trailer, airtight, bug-tight foil. But I wouldn't just use it. I would also use some kind of metal, like galvanized metal over your wooden decking. After you've done that, step 3 is to make the subfloor. So the subfloor is like the foundation of your floor. So you're gonna make a skeleton floor. So just beams between which you're gonna place the isolation. So, okay, so your subfloor. You are gonna place beams along the edges of your trailer and in the middle parts, but leave enough room so that you can place the isolation in. So you're just gonna make a skeleton, like I said before. After you did this, you have to secure the floor somehow. And the most easiest way to do this is by going underneath your trailer and drilling up through the trailer, through the decking, into your subfloor, and just securing your floor like that. But it's very important that this is done right, because this is your floor we're talking about. If your floor isn't right, then your whole house is gonna be wrong, and you don't want your house to be wrong. So it's very important that you do this securely and safely. So I would advise to do some other research into this subject. So now you have decking with on top a skeleton floor. But what now? Now it's time to start putting in isolation. I will go further into depth on all the different kind of isolation in a different video. So if you want that, please comment below. It's very important that for most types of isolation that they stay as dry as possible. So after you put in your isolation in your flooring, you have to put an anti-vapor foil over your isolation, and after that you can use plywood to close the floor. And then, boom, you have a finished floor. You can decorate your floor by putting planks on top of it. Maybe you want some sort of carpet on your floor. You can all put that over this. But now your subfloor is finished, and the only thing that rests is to make it look pretty. And that's all up to you how you want to do that. So now I have explained how you build your floor on a tiny house on wheels, but what if you want to build your tiny house on a foundation? Like I do. What? How? Please help, Sasha. Of course I will help you. I am here to help you. Okay. Next step. First step. It's a bit different again if you want to build your tiny house on a movable foundation, or if you don't want it to be movable. So there's just an extra step to it if you want to make it movable, which I will explain. And after that I will explain just how a normal foundation would be made. If you want a movable foundation, there's just an extra step, an extra important step. Because if you want to have a movable foundation, you have to make sure that your house can be lifted and put down somewhere else. So you need something to grab that house by and put it upwards. It's very important. You can make joists. So you make a joist that goes underneath the house, longer than your house is wide. That is wider than your house, so you have something to lift it off by. You place two joists. You don't place them all on the edges of your house. So you place them about 1.5 meters inward, unless you have a very, very long house, and you place them a bit further inward. This is to make sure that the center of your floor is stable enough. There are two types of joists. There are two types you can use. You can use removable joists, or you can just secure them to your house. There are two different types. They practically work the same, only one is removable and one is not, of course. After you've made your joist all the way underneath your house, you have to make sure that there is room underneath your house. So you have to place your house on top of like a couple of stones or bricks on at least 3 points on either side of your house, just to make sure that it doesn't collapse in on itself. Next step is just basically build your skeleton frame again. So just the same way as I explained with a tiny house on wheels, you build a skeleton frame, you close off the underneath the skeleton frame, and you just place the beams or the joists underneath that frame. If you want to make sure that it's really, really secure, you can, on top of your skeleton frame made of wood, you can put a steel frame just to make sure it's really, really strong. But in my opinion, that's just a lot of extra work and a lot of extra money that isn't worth it if you just build your wooden frame properly. So just make sure your wooden frame is strong enough and it'll be a-okay. Making your floor on a foundation after you've made the joists in your skeleton floor, it's just basically the same as with a tiny house on wheels. So you make decking. On top of the decking you put a subfloor. In the subfloor you place isolation. On top of the isolation and the subfloor you put an anti-vapor foil, and on top of that you put the top of your flooring. And of course, underneath that pancake of stuff, you put your joists. Make sure that your house doesn't lean on those joists, only on those joists. Make sure it also has other points where it's secure to the ground, like a couple of bricks, like I said before. And now we have a floor. Yay! Good job, you! Okay, so building the framing of your walls is basically the same as building the framing of your floor. It's just the wall instead of the floor. We start by making the skeleton frame. First, if you have a tiny house on wheels, what do you have to do? Yes, indeed, level your tiny house. Because if you don't level your tiny house, you will have a crooked tiny house. And unless you want a crooked tiny house, level your floor. Just please level your floor. You're gonna build a skeleton frame and you're not gonna build it directly onto your floor. You're gonna build it horizontal on the floor. So if you have a long wall, I advise you to chop the wall into separate parts. So make separate parts of the frame and put them on your floor one by one, so it's easier to lift. Because if you have this really long wall, you have to have a lot of people help you lift, and it's heavy, more can go wrong. So it's way easier to just divide your wall into separate parts. So just as with the floor, you make your frame, your skeleton frame, by cutting off joists, or making joists, cutting off beams, and just making that frame. It's very important that on the places that you have windows or doors, that you support it extra. So you make sure it's extra secure, extra strong in the places that you have a window or a door, because those are weak spots of your wall, so you have to secure them properly. You can do this by putting in an extra joist or an extra beam in your structure. You also, of course, have to know at this point where your walls and where your doors are gonna be, because you have to keep that into account when making the skeleton frame. So now you've made the skeleton frame. What do I do now, Sasha? What do I do now? Let me explain. I am here for you. So now you have your skeleton frame. You're gonna put that onto your flooring. So very important, you start with the head of the house, or the short side of the house. It doesn't matter which short side, is with a short side. Okay, so you have your short side and you have your wall, so you secure it with screws. And to make sure it's really secure, because right now it doesn't have the support of the other walls, so you place an extra beam, just temporarily, on the outside from the wall to your floor. So you have right here, and then you place a beam like this, just to make sure it's temporarily, just to make sure that it's strong and it'll stand. Now, this is why you had to start with the short side of your house. You are gonna close off that skeleton frame from the inside. So you can use plywood, for example, and you just close the whole thing. You just close the whole wall off. If you have a window on your short side, it's best for the structure if you end plywood in the middle part of your door, in the middle part of your door, or in the middle part of your window, because it's the strongest that way. If you put it like this, it's not as strong as if you put it in the middle. So make sure the seams are in the middle of your window or of your door. When you finish your first wall, you can do the second wall. You're just gonna go clockwise around your little home. So let's start with the second wall. You just again make the skeleton frame and you can put it on your tiny house. Make sure that you again make an extra beam from the wall to the ground to secure the wall temporarily if it's needed, and temporarily secure the wall with screws. Again, block off the inside with plywood and move to your next wall, but keeping in mind that if there are windows or doors in your wall, that you make the seams not on the edges of the window or the door, but in the middle. And then your next wall, again with the plywood, and your next wall, and then you have 4 walls. You have from the inside, it looks like the walls are complete, but then you go on the outside and you see there are still holes in my wall. Help. My wall, I don't want holes in my wall. Nobody does. So how do I fix this? So what you're gonna do, those holes are those cutouts basically, because your beams are thick. If you place the plywood from the inside against your beam like this, and you have a lot of extra space. In that space will come to be your isolation. Your isolation and your electricity. And again, I will go more into depth about those two in a different video. Now you have a floor and you have a wall, but you still get wet when it starts raining. Let's fix that, shall we? Let's install a roof that will keep us nice and dry. Okay, so the roof. But building the roof, it's the easiest that you've already made cutouts in the walls where your beams of your roof will come to be. It's easier because if you do it afterwards, when you've already built the house, you have to go on ladders and just cut out it when you're standing on top of a ladder, and just more difficult. So it's easier if you keep it into account when building your walls, so you don't have to go through all that extra trouble later. Roofs are fairly easy to make, at least when you have a flat roof or a roof that is just skewed to one side. So if you have a roof this is your house, if you have just one side that it leans towards, it's easier, or a flat roof, it's easier to make than when you have a pointed roof. Not impossible, it's just more difficult. If you want to have a roof that leans towards one side, you just cut out beams, make beams, and you just place them on top of your walls, secure them, that's it. You can close off the roof from the inside, and from the outside you can put in isolation, put an anti-vapor foil, close it off with extra plywood, and then you can have your roofing on top of that. So it's fairly easy to build a roof when you just have one side that it leans to, or if it's flat. But if you have a pointed roof, it gets more difficult. Let me explain. Let's go to the whiteboard. Let's talk about pointed roofs. The trouble with a pointed roof is you have a lot of force on these 2 points of your roof, which will push the walls that are connected like here, which will push them outward. And we don't want that. Eventually, when the walls get older and older, the force gets stronger and stronger for more and more for the walls to bear, and it's just too much force on your 2 walls. So we don't want that. So what are we going to do about it? We are going to make trusses. There are different types of trusses that you can use. For example, the most popular is an A-shaped truss. So you make a beam horizontally across like so, and you make another beam vertical like so. Now you have an A-shaped roof. You do this because there are triangles here. You have a triangle inside here, and you have a triangle inside here. So there is more force on this beam right here, here, and here, instead of just on these 2 spots. Always remember when building an A-shaped roof, the 2 T's: trusses and triangles. These are very important. You can always build different kind of trusses. For example, you build another horizontal beam like this, but you go like this, and you have yet again triangles, because triangles are good. If you're feeling really fancy, you can build one like so. Or you can build one like this. Just make sure that you have the 2 T's, trusses and triangles, indeed. Now, you know, if you want to make a pointed roof, how that works. So now you have a roof, you have walls, and you have a floor. We're done with the structure and with the skeleton of our tiny house. Good job! I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and click on that little notification bell to be the first to know when I post another video. Goodbye for now. I hope to see you in my next video. Have a good day.